Hi, I'm Kelly from Kelly Jones Jewellery. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this one. Very different from what we've been making. And it's made using a bead and a small cabochon. I've put a list in the description below of everything you'll need to make this, including links to my Etsy shop, which is www.kellyjonesjewellery.com. There's also links to my Facebook and Instagram. So please mention me when you're sharing your work online made from my tutorials. And I'd love to see your finished work if you're on Facebook or Instagram. To make this pendant, you'll need 0.8mm wire, that's 20 gauge. I've cut 3 lengths at 11 inches, that's 28 centimetres. One at 6 inches, which is 15 centimetres, and one at 8.5 inches, which is 22 centimetres. You'll need weaving wire. I'm using 0.315, that's 28 gauge. You need about 500 centimetres, and you can go up and down a gauge on these wire sizes that I'm giving you. I've got a 10mm bead and a 7mm flat backed cabochon. I've wound my weaving wire onto a bobbin. That's a Bobeeze bobbin by Beadsmith. If you don't have a bobbin, you can just cut lengths as you go. Tools, I've got my pliers, round nose pliers, wire cutters, nylon pliers. If you don't have nylon pliers, don't worry, I'll just use those for straightening the wires, flattening the weaves. And I might be using bail pliers today. If you don't have bail pliers, you could it's just to wrap the wires over to make a bail shape. So anything that kind of size, a crochet hook, a knitting needle, a thin pen or pencil should do the trick. So let's get started. So we're going to start 4.5 inches. If you take your 3 longer wires, we're going to start 4.5 inches from the beginning of the wires, which is 11.5 centimetres, so thereabouts. So take your weaving wire. We're going to start with 3 wraps around the bottom wire. It's quite a simple weave really. Go around the 2 wires, then go around all 3, then go around the 2, so we've gone over the second wire, then wrap around the bottom wire 3 times. And that's it, so it's only simple. Go over the second, over the third, over the second, wrap 3 times around the bottom wire. So keep repeating that little weave. So I've done, I think 22 repeats on that weave, just a couple of inches. Cut the weaving wire from the beginning and always flatten down any sharp bits. So right in the middle of the weave, I'm going to start to bend it a little bit. I'm doing it slowly to try and get it even. And my bead sits in the middle there, and I want my weave to stop in the same place on both sides. So I'm going to cut that now I'm happy with it. and I want about that much space around it. So when you're happy with your shape, hold in the top where the wires cross there, and I'm going to bend the wires up on both sides. So all the wires all sit next to each other. So now take the other wire length that you cut, which was 8.5 inches, and we're going to position it right in the middle. And we're just going to hold it in place like that. And you want to position it so it sits roughly the same length as the other wires, and the rest of it sits below. And you want to try and hold it in place there and add it to this weave now we're going to do across all the wires. And so we're going to include it. So take your weaving wire, and we're going to start with 3 wraps around that bottom wire to attach it. Slide it down. So then go over the second wire. So you've gone around the bottom 2 and come up between those bottom 2 wires. Over the third, so you've gone around the next 2, up between those 2 wires. Over the next wire, which is our one we're holding. So again, we've wrapped around the next 2, and then we come up between those 2 wires. So we're going to keep doing this all the way up. Go around the next 2, and then up between them. Lots of wire shuffling going on here. Go around the next 2, up between them, over the top. We've just gone around 2 wires and up between them all the way to the top. I'm going to slide that down a little bit to there. So once you're at the top, go around the top wire. And now we're going to go around each wire individually all the way back down. So you want to come under that next wire and around it. And then under the next wire and around that. And careful, because it's hard to see which one is the next wire. There we go. And then around that one. So you go around 2 wires on the way up and 1 wire on the way back down. So go around each wire individually all the way back down. And that's our weave, holding all the wires together and adding that middle wire there. So keep repeating that. So I've done 8 repeats of that weave there. I cut that weaving wire off from the beginning. So now I'm going to move those 3 up out of the way a bit. And I'm going to move these 2 down. So I'm going to go over the second wire and up between, and then over the third wire and up between to get myself into position so I can work on those two middle-ish wires there. So working just across these two now. I'm going to do 3 wraps around the bottom wire. No, I'm not. I've changed my mind. I'm going to do 3 wraps around the top wire. So I'm going over the top wire and up between. And I'm going to go 3 wraps around the top wire. And then 3 wraps around the both wires. And come up between the two. So we're going to repeat that, 3 wraps around the top wire. And then 3 wraps around the 2 wires. I think I've got too much wire wrapped on my bobbin because it's a bit heavy. Keeps pulling on my wire. So repeat that, weave. So I've done 12 repeats of that 3-3 weave there. And I'm gonna cut my weaving wire. I'm leaving 12 inches attached. So I've got a nice length to add more to that weaving a bit. I'm going to take my weaving wire and the middle one over that side. So these 3, I want this middle wire. I'm going to add coils. So I'm just taking my weaving wire and coiling it around and around that base wire. And every now and then I'll squash it all together to keep it tidy. I'll do a little bit more. I'm going to do some and then I can add more in a bit if we want to add some more. So I'm just pulling that all the way down to the bottom now. Sit it against the weave. Push it together to keep it nice. I'm going to cut that tail, the bottom. And now take your bead and we're going to pop it onto the bare wire that's sticking out the bottom. And we're going to take that wire and bend it around the weave. So I don't forget to mention later on, please mention me when you're sharing your work made from my tutorials. And I really appreciate it, and it really does make me smile when I see people mention me and I get to see all the finished work made. I really do love it. And I really appreciate you sharing my name next to the work you've done from the tutorials on wherever you are, on Facebook or Instagram or Pinterest, because it really does help bring the traffic here so you can keep receiving all these free tutorials. So what I've done is I've just bent that wire around the weave, and that's just sticking straight out the bottom now. I shall leave that there. So now take your bail pliers. I'm going to use the smaller size and grip it on the big weave. I'm going to carefully bend all the wires over so the big weave stays to the back and all these wires come over the front there. And I want these wires to come this way and these wires to go this way. So I'll just push them over at the top. What I'm going to do is, I've moved down a little bit and I'm going to bend the pliers back. So this actually goes back a little bit instead of being completely flat. Just adds a bit of shape to it. And then these wires are going to go one way and these are going to go the other. So I'm going to take these 3 wires and I'm going to push them out to the side a little bit and scoop them around. And I'm going to bend them to go over the top of the bead. Try not to misshape them too much or let them cross over each other. And then I'm going to bend them around so they come back through above the bead. It is a bit fiddly, but it'll make sense in a minute. Trying to hold the shape at the front there. So I've just pulled it a little bit tight around there. And then this weave is going to bend around to go the other way. And don't push flat. We've got a nice scoop. This is our bail here. We don't want to lose our bail shape. So you want to shape your wires. I'm curving this one around, but you want to keep that scoop. You want to keep that gap down there. So then once this reaches here, it's then going to come around the bead the other way. So I need to add repeats to that weave. So I added more repeats to that weave. And then I'm going to hold it where the wires cross in the middle there. I'm going to carefully bend it around to go around the bead. And I want it to go through underneath the bead there to the back. not to misshape the front. So it comes to just where my weave finishes. Like that, so that's what we have so far. I'm going to cut that weaving wire. And I'm going to cut that weaving wire as well. So I want to add my little stone into this gap here. So I'm going to do that now, otherwise it won't fit. With a piece of base wire that you cut earlier and your little cab. Position the cab in the middle of the wire. And I'm just going to bend the wire around the stone. That's going to happen a lot. Okay. And then I'm going to just hold it, otherwise it's going to keep flying off. I'm going to pull the wires around the stone quite tight. My stone's quite thick, which makes it a little bit easier to do. So I've turned to the back. Hard to show you without throwing it across the room. So now I'm going to keep bringing this wire around and slightly over the back of the stone. If you don't want to do this, you can always just grab a bead, pop a bead on a bit of wire and then insert that into the place where I'm going to put this. Makes it a bit easier. Or if you fancy a challenge of adding a small stone, if you do manage to do this, you can then add small stones to all sorts of things. So I've turned back to the front now, so that's the back. I've turned back to the front. I'm just wrapping around nice and tight. Hold the stone in there. You need the wires to finish. Sort of, how are we going to do this? We need them to be in opposite directions. So I need one coming out one way and one coming out the other. So I'm going to turn that like that. And then this one I'll do the same. So that's secured the stone. Little moonstone. So originally I wanted this top piece to be a bail, but the original design was I wanted a big, well, a little stone. I've selected quite a large stone to sit in there. So by the end of this video I'd have worked out another way of attaching the cord to the top, because I really want to put that stone there. I love that there. So with this, where the wire bends, I'm going to bend it to the back with pliers, because if I start pulling on it, I'm just going to pull the wire straight off the stone. And then this one, I want that to go to the back as well. Pop it back in. And I'm just going to attach it by wrapping around. I'm holding it in place at the front very securely. I'm just going to wrap it around the big weave at the back. So get it where you want it to be. I want it to be quite low. Wrap it around the big weave. And then I'm going to finish it by cutting the wire short and just wrapping it around and popping it around the weave again to hold it all tightly in place. So I've attached that in place. The wires go around the back, and then I've popped the one in there, squeezed it around the weave. The other one goes down there, and again I've squeezed it around the weave. So I'll cut it quite short, there's just a little bit sticking out. So I'm pulling these 3 wires over this side underneath those 2, and then you have to, these 3 wires at the top, you have to really hang on to those, otherwise they'll come over. So I'll flatten those out a little bit, pull those wires to the back. And then these 2, I'll take this one first. I'm going to scoop it around to follow the weave. But I'm going to cross over the weave and go straight across the bottom like that. And then this last wire, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to scoop it around. And I'm going to make that follow the other bare wire to go straight off the bottom there. But where they cross over the weave, I'm going to add a little bit of weaving wire and secure that down, I think. So take the top one. I'm going to wrap 3 wraps around that wire. Slide it into place. And I'm going to go 3 times around the both wires. Come up between and 3 times around that single wire again. Now I'm going to cut this wire, leaving myself just a little bit of length on there. Because I want that to sit there, I'm going to take that wire and post it through to the back. And I'm coming around this weave on the side. And I'm going to come underneath the wires. Then I'm going to wrap around both the wires 3 times. Come up between the wires. And then I'm going to wrap 3 times around that top wire. And that will hold it together and hold it down, so I can cut both ends of that wire. remember to keep flattening off all those sharp ends. So looking at these 3 wires coming out here now, I'm going to work on these bottom 2. I have just straightened them with my nylon pliers a bit. So I'll leave that one up there a minute. So take your weaving wire and we're going to wrap 3 times around the top wire. Slide it right the way down as far as you can. We're going to go 3 times around both wires and come up between the 2. 3 times around the top wire, so that's our repeat. 3 times around the top wire, 3 times around both wires. So I've repeated that weave. Cut that tail end off. You just need enough to be able to get around the bead. I'm not going to reach that. Right, got it. So I want that to scoop around the bead, twisting it a little bit. So I need to add some more repeats to that. I don't know why it keeps twisting. And keep pushing your weave together as you go. So I want that weave to reach, so I can post my wires down that gap there. So I'm going to add a few more repeats to that. I added a few more repeats so I can get round the stone and post it down there. So I'm going to cut that weaving wire now while I can get to it. And then I'm going to bend those wires down, trying not to misshape the weave. That's a bit tight. So then I just need to push the weave around, pull it into place. Struggling with this one and I keep twisting it. So the 3rd wire that we had left, because there was 3 on that side, I'm just going to make it follow that weave. And post it the same way through to the back to follow the 2 wires from the weave. You have to do it carefully because you want it to follow quite nicely. And then when it's where you want it to be, bend it over like we did with the other for the weave. Lots of sticky outy wires at the moment. I'm going to finish off these 3 short wires by cutting them and bending them over that weave. I'm going to cut them quite short. I'm going to bend them straight over that weave. Squeeze them down tight with the pliers. Push them together to make it look a bit neater. So these 2 wires now here, that cross over this wire which was the bead wire, making sure they sit nice and straight. Take this bead wire, I want to take it over and around those 2, and I don't want them to cross over each other or misshape. And I'll do that again, I'll go around it again. Cut it so it finishes at the back. Squeeze it a little bit so it doesn't move. I'm going to cut another sharp bit off there. And all that's left now is these 2. So weaving across these 2 wires now, I'm going to wrap 3 times around the bottom wire. Push that down. And then 3 wraps around the both wires. And we'll repeat that. So I've done about 10 repeats of that one, that weave. Cut the tail end off from the beginning. And I'm going to take this weave over the top and curve it around like that. Does that make sense? So I've curved it around, but I've also pulled it over the pendant like that. I've added a few more repeats. I'm going to go around again. So I'm doing a tight little curl at the bottom there. Now I shall add a few more repeats to the weave. So I've added a few more repeats, and what I'm going to do now is just secure this down because it's sort of flapping about a bit. And I'm going to cut the weaving wire off, leaving a little length still attached, and I'm going to post it down just to pin that down. So I've left that much weaving wire still on there. So about 8 inches, and I'm going to post it. Where do I want it to sit? So I can get it down there between the bead and the weave. It really is up to you what you do with this. As soon as you've got your bead on there, you can do what you like with all these weaves. I'm just playing around with it now. You can finish it whenever you like. You don't have to keep adding all these little extra bits on. It's entirely up to you. I just fancied working with a bit of silver and rose quartz and having a play with a bead design, and I do love adding the little stone. This design has been on my mind for a while, so it's nice to get it out in the open. I must admit it hasn't turned out how I thought it would. So I've popped it through between the bead and the weave. I've posted it back through that little gap there, and then so you can't see it, I shall go underneath the wires, pushing the weave down, pulling on the weaving wire, and then I can carry on adding a few more repeats, and that'll hold it down. So I've added a few more repeats, and I think I'm going to finish off this wire by adding a little curl there. I'm going to cut that weaving wire, and this other wire I'm going to send over to the back, and I shall secure that by wrapping around that weave, I think. So I shall cut it quite short, and then with round nose pliers I'm going to bend it around that weave there. Make a little gap first, and then squeeze it tight around the weave to hold it in place, and then that'll hold this, so I haven't got to secure this curl. And I'm going to do a tiny curl. Pinch the end a little bit. Just do a little curl there, and I'm going to push it to the back. Tuck it in there a little bit like that. So now these two wires to the left at the bottom, I'm going to attach with 3 wraps around the top wire. Slide that down into place. Three wraps around both wires. Come up between. 3 wraps around that top wire. And repeat that. So I've done 10 repeats, and I've cut that weaving wire from the beginning. So now I'm going to bend the weave this way. So it's going to go around like that. I'm going to add more repeats. So we've added more repeats to that weave. And I'm going to take the weave around and I'm going to post it through there. So I'm going to shape it first and then I'm going to try and bend it through. My wires are really too short, so I shall tell you to add a few inches to yours. I'll cut that weaving wire before we get there, so I won't get to that in a bit. So I've posted it through, bent it back up, and then I shall bend them back over that wire to the front. I think the shorter one I'm going to cut short. And squeeze it around the weave. And the longer one, I'm going to put a small curl on it. Put that against the weave as well. So I found a way of attaching a cord. What do you think to that? Because you can always turn it upside down and add a jump ring through the bottom and make that the top. Or you could put jump rings at both ends and make it into a bracelet. I just push those outer wires out a bit and attach the rings. So I've oxidised it. I think it's come out really nice. So I've added these two little jump rings on the top here, so I can add the cord to the top. You can also add a cord if you thread through from the back to the front on both sides, like that. If you want to, it's up to you. So I hope you find this tutorial easy to follow. And please subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you all in the next video.